This is part 8 of Neurips conversation about papers. In this particular segment, I'm going to talk in particular about some ideas of how to improve robotic tasks, whether it's navigation, whether it's handling of things. So the 4 papers are the following: DiffuseBot, breeding soft robotics with physics-augmented generative diffusion models. The idea here is to generate simulation and then help robots execute physical tasks. So, excuse me, what I mean with that is you have diffusion plus physics and help the robot knowing the physics execute the tasks. Diffusion is sort of a visual geometric guideline, and physics, of course, includes the physics. The second paper, MULTIREACT, multimodal tools, augmented reasoning, acting, traces for embodied agent planning. Now, in this particular case, you splice up a video and then you give each frame or each segment of frames captioning. So you're using text for semantic guidance for the robot. The third is how to prompt your robot, a PromptBook for manipulation skills with code as policies. This, in my view, think of it like a job description for a robot. So you help the robot through prompts get a task done. Last paper, exploitation guided exploration for semantic embodied navigation. In this particular paper, what the authors are doing is they're trying to make the robot more creative by having exploration and exploitation separate, but having exploration sort of what's called teacher forced, which means that when you get close to a specific goal, you stop exploring, you go into exploitation. The way I see this is, let's say if full self-drive has to go from Cow Hollow to Presidio, how do you solve this problem? In an end-to-end learning problem where there's no segmentation, you could ask yourself, well, how is the agent even gonna, get from A to B? It could do all kinds of things. It could choose to go, up to Marin and all the way around the bay. How does it know? Well, obviously there are, sort of shortcuts to that. But if you really want to do it end-to-end, if you don't want to have any kind of explicit, let's say, minimize the distance or minimize this or minimize that. You want to have creativity and exploitation in a compute efficient manner. This is what these authors are trying to achieve. This is an Not Even Wrong podcast. It's January 26, 2024. This is Krim Telco. There is no update. It's morning here in Europe. The markets are closed. We're down 22.5%. The market's up 2.6%. We're underperforming by 25.1%. Of course, Tesla is our main problem here. We actually are up quite a bit in NVIDIA. Interestingly enough, both stocks, NVIDIA and Tesla, both of our positions have done the same exact performance, but with another sign in front of it. So while NVIDIA is up 24% for the year, Tesla's down 24%. Unfortunately, our positioning is not equal. So we are down a lot, and that's the nature of the game. I think we're going to talk about positioning and things like that in other podcasts. In this particular episode, we're discussing Neurips Part 8, robot navigation, robot training, task training, creativity, all these things that, in my opinion, are so interesting when it comes to reinforcement learning in particular, are being discussed here. So the first paper I want to discuss is DiffuseBot, breeding soft robots with physics-augmented generative diffusion models. So what this paper is trying to do is use diffusion for planning of, think of it like action planning. So you're, you want to grab something and put that, you grab an egg, you want to grab an egg and put it in a pot. Now, you can segment this problem into a graphics problem. Okay, where's the egg? How do I get from A to B? A pure graphics problem, right? As a human, you walk down the street. That's a graphic. Like your eyes see where you gotta go. diffusion helps solve that problem of how do you get there, what's in between you and where you got to go. So purely, let's call it geometric problems. But then there's the physics problem too, which is I'm going to grab this egg. How am I going to grab this egg? Of course, I'm not going to want to, splash it and all that stuff. And that's where the physics comes into play. What these people are doing is they're using actually physics simulation to help the robot also understand the physics of this particular object that it's supposed to grasp. Now, to be clear, this paper is really more of a proof of concept paper, but I think the idea fundamentally is really interesting, applying to humanoid robot, for example, Optimus in particular. You could say, look, you can have an egg and you have diffusion to geometrically solve the problem of how to get to the egg, and then physics simulation of how to actually touch the egg. That's kind of what they're doing in their pseudo algorithm. That's how they explain it. The technical details, of course, are you go read the paper for that. I don't want to discuss this here, but I think fundamentally my general thoughts on this is that I think that's part of the reason why we're so excited about NVIDIA, because you want to have physics incorporated into your robotic actions. And one way to do that is to have a physics model. So you think of it like sort of, off policy model that helps maybe even teacher force the robot how to let's say grab the egg. What that means is the robot is not learning how the egg feels while it's touching the egg. It knows that there's a ground truth which is teacher forced onto the robot. This is the idea here. You could also have a different model, right? You can have a pure on policy learning with, let's say, tactical or haptic sensors that learn how the egg feels. This would be, I guess, sort of the Optimus approach, the end-to-end learning approach, right? You have nothing, you have no ground truth. You have nothing that tells the robot how things are. I think the jury's out. There's definitely some should you have a teacher force model? Should you have any kind of ground truth while you're learning? Or should you learn from the ground up without any physics-based information? In fact, this is how humans act, right? A 2-year-old child learns how to manipulate a Lego. The child certainly doesn't know Newtonian physics. In fact, to be clear, we humans, we're under the impression we understand physics, when in reality we don't understand nothing about physics. We have a certain interpretation of physics, and we're probably much closer to what we call reality than maybe 200 years ago or 500 years ago, certainly before Galileo. But we still don't really understand physics. We don't understand quantum physics. We don't understand a lot of things. We're even struggling to interpret quantum physics, in particular things like the dual existence of particle and wave for smallest particles and things like along those lines. So do we really understand physics? Now, the laws of physics are good heuristics for us to navigate the world, and in particular also to apply to technology. But when it comes to a robot, to give the robot some sort of explicit knowledge through physics, whether it's in sim or even while it's training in the real world as sort of a teacher-forced off-policy guideline to, let's say, learn how to touch eggs, in my opinion, it's a good first step. But in particular, but in practice, I think end-to-end learning is probably more interesting, simply because in end-to-end learning, we don't need to really understand explicitly our environment. We can just rely on data to learn how to navigate the environment without understanding the environment. This is the fundamental idea. In this paper, they're obviously, just to summarize this paper, they're doing the exact opposite. They are trying to use physics-based models on top of diffusion models to help the robot deal with tasks. And I'm just questioning this particular idea philosophically, and whether end-to-end learning is maybe the right choice, simply because we don't really understand physics. We don't understand. Now we probably have a good understanding of how to touch a ball and how to deal with these things, but I don't think Lionel Messi really understands physics. I'm pretty sure he doesn't. Nor does Aaron Rodgers, nor does Baryshnikov. They don't understand physics, but they're incredibly good at navigating nature in the physical world with their particular skills, because they have an intuitive understanding of physics and their own embodied creature and how it navigates through the world. In other words, they're good athletes or dancers. But I guess, again, last thing I want to say here, we are still trying to understand how to teach machines to navigate in nature. And navigation in nature involves understanding physics. And the question is whether we should have an explicit knowledge of physics and sort of an off-policy teacher-forced ground truth imposition on the learning process, or whether we should just go one-to-one. This is just an open question. The next paper talks about multimodal learning. And I'm still trying to figure out whether I should even name the papers. They sound pretty complicated. MULTIREACT, multimodal tools, augmented reasoning, acting traces for embodied agent planning. Okay, what is this paper really doing? This paper is using large language models to caption videos and then have a reward-based system that goes frame by frame or epoch by epoch, whatever, whether it's by frame or whatever you're using to caption, whatever your captioning horizon is. In that particular epoch of the caption, you're going to use some sort of reward system to help the robot guide towards a task execution. So in particular, what does that really mean? You imagine a Tesla Optimus seeing a video of clothes folding. The video gets spliced up, and each spliced frame gets a language captioning. Now the robot learns how to fold based on this data set and uses the captioning as measurement for reward function. The text helps evaluate whether the robot is on the right path, right? So this is, again, you could say, it's kind of in the class of models like the previous one, where we had physics-based augmentation of diffusion models. Here we have text-based augmentation of videos. So what the authors are doing, what this whole series of papers in this particular episode is doing, is trying to augment learning, trying to have data-based learning, but have, throw in some cues, throw in some help. Here it's captioning, it's text. So you have kind of a job description of what a robot is supposed to do, and you're splicing it up in epochs. When you grab a shirt, then fold the both sides, and then it does that, and it gets rewarded if it does it. And it's very close to the next paper I'm going to discuss, PromptBook, but the difference is, of course, that here it's multimodal learning in a sense that it's not a prompting. It's just simply the video has an action and a text, and you're trying to evaluate the action both on the visual and the text. So it's multimodal learning, which brings the question, which we always have in multimodal learning, which is, how do we even do that? Do we just concatenate? Do we use some sort of cosine proximity of one-hot vectors to realize that, let's say, the action and the text are close, and if the closer they are, the better? Those are interesting problems, interesting technical problems that come. I think multimodal learning, if we use embodied intelligence, if you use animals and humans as an example, we use multimodal learning. So I think there's nothing wrong with multimodal learning. The question is whether the multimodal learning is whether it's done properly. There's still some tech. Again, like just how do you actually learn from video and text? How is just um, is one hot vector cosine proximity? Is that what multimodal learning means, or what is it? I mean, there's obviously a lot of research in that field. That's part of why you go to a place like Neurips, to understand what people are doing, and that's the beauty of academia. I think that's where academia can really shine, and particularly now with the transformer architecture dominating AI and multimodal transformers coming into play, the idea to have multimodal learning and to solve multimodal learning problems technically, I think, is going to be very important. That's why I picked this paper. I think it's a very important step. Whether this particular paper is successful, and of course everybody shows results and ablation studies, I'm not even going to go into that. I think conceptually the idea is very compelling, and therefore that's that's why we picked it. The third paper I want to discuss is very, very similar, but in this case it's literally a job description: how to prompt your robot, a prompt book for manipulation skills with code as policies. Now here there is this is certainly a state-of-the-art paper, because it's using prompts to guide the robot in helping the robot to do what it's supposed to do. So PromptBook is really a blueprint of how to use prompts to help robots navigate their environment. This is the idea. There's a very detailed description. They start with examples, the high-level robot description, robot API documentation, robot policy constraints, code guidelines, chain of thought policy reasoning, interleaved states. So there's different steps that they propose of how to deal with the problem of prompting a robot to get something done. I think this is also, I'm not sure if this paper is from OpenAI, from DeepMind, but it's sort of tangentially in the realm of recursive, self-improvement, in a sense, recursive, what's the word? When the robot has the ability to deploy resources such as, let's say, call an API and execute a certain task. So you can use the large language models also as an operating system here. So it's not just a prompt book in telling the robot what to do in real physical terms, but also in telling the robot what other tools to deploy in order to execute the task. So again, this is a very comprehensive, attempt to make LLMs more useful. This paper attempts to make LLMs more useful in long-term robotic planning. The key problem here is context lens. If you can't tell a robot, please clean my kitchen, you can't tell a robot, just listen, please clean my kitchen, right? Because it's not clear what that means. Even a human wouldn't understand. But if you compartmentalize the problem and use step-by-step instructions and add information about intermediate states, you can get better results. It's like a job description. So clean my kitchen means, okay, here are some examples of a clean kitchen, so you know what it is. Now, in order to clean my kitchen, you need to do, let's say, you got to clean the floor, you got to do this, you got to do that. Now you call certain APIs. Okay, here's an API that go to the dishes, and now call the API, load dishes into dishwasher. Once that's done, you're done with that. Load the other API, mop the floor. Robot policy constraints. You can't break stuff. You can't hit people. You are in a room that is relatively small, large. Code guidelines, chain of thought. Once you've done this, you do that. Once you mop the floor, don't get and you see a glass on the floor, pick up the glass, but keep mopping the floor. Don't now go back to the old problem of loading the dishwasher. Those are the sort of, that's what they're trying to do. I think it's an incredibly important idea, and this is going to help me transition into the next paper, which is really, what about task descriptions What about sparsity of rewards? So clean my kitchen is a formulation of a problem that has a very sparse reward, because clean my kitchen just means whenever the kitchen's clean, you get rewarded. But what about all the intermediate steps? How do I get to that state? A problem well stated is a problem solved, or something like that. Buckminster Fuller. Or Le Corbusier, I'm not sure, one of the two said that. So if I just say, go clean my kitchen, if I tell my 16-year-old son, go clean my kitchen, it's for sure not going to be clean. But if I tell him, listen, you're going to go to the kitchen, you're going to do the dishes, and then you're going to mop the floor, and you're going to make sure that you don't break nothing, and you're also going to make sure that the refrigerator doesn't look like some sort of, exercise bag or something, but it's clean. Like I give him a decent compartmentalized job description. I call APIs. I say, look, when you load the dishwasher, this is how you're going to do it. When you mop the floor, this is how, like, it's very similar. If I just tell my son, now if my son's trained, if he's trained well, I can maybe just say, go clean the kitchen, right? Once he's done that 100 times, I don't need to, maybe this whole prompt book can also be helped as a sort of training tool. I think all these papers are academic papers, right? This is not Tesla showing you FSD, customer ready technology. This is academic stuff. We're thinking, we're exploring, we're thinking about, okay, what are these steps and how do we best incorporate them into the operating system of the robot, and how do we use, in particular, transformer-based architecture for better semantic planning, for operational things like calling an API, like those sort of things. I think it's very interesting. In my opinion, these are very interesting papers. The last paper I want to discuss is exploitation guided exploration. Now, this paper is in some ways very interesting philosophically. In other ways, it's almost a tautology. Here's why. Like, what this paper is basically saying is, can we be more creative if we know that we have specified subtasks that we can do? What that means is, look, if I know that I have very detailed information about hiking and surfing through, let's say, All Trails and Surfline, those two apps help me really navigate any place I go. Knowing that, I'm going to be more creative in exploring the world. For example, I will go, instead of just going to Yosemite and the Eastern Sierra and all the places that I'm familiar with, I'm just going to take a chance. I'm going to go to the Pyrenees in Spain. My Spanish is not very good, and in particular, my Catalan is, I have no Catalan. So going to a place like that without knowing that there are specialized agents in those two apps, it's going to make it a lot harder for me to have a good time. But knowing that I have those exploitation capabilities will give me more confidence in exploring, so make me more creative. This is kind of what this paper is saying. There's some technical stuff here to talk about PPOs and things like that. Again, the problem statement, if you want to go from Cow Hollow to the Presidio, how do you navigate this problem? First, set a semantic map based on map data. Then formulate landmarks as intermediate goals. Now let the agent explore until it gets close to a landmark, and then exploit. The separation of explore and exploit should, in principle, improve exploration and yield better results. It's also computationally more efficient. So this goes back to the fundamental problem. If we have one-to-one learning, go from here to there. How does the agent even know? Like, what does that even mean? Well, you can have explicit constraints. You can say, go from here to there, minimize time, minimize gasoline, minimize this, you can have those types of constraints. But how about if you do it in a one-to-one learning set? How does the agent even know what's the best way to get there? Well, you could potentially segment. You could say, listen, go from A to B. There are a couple of sub-goals that you geometrically define. Within those epochs, when you go from let's say you have 10 you have 10 landmarks, T, T1, T2, T3 until T10. So A to B is subdivided in 10 T's. From A to T1, just explore until you get close to T1. Once you're in a certain distance, lambda of T1, now just go and explore. Now, once you're close, just, use what's called visual servo navigation. Do what Tesla's doing, for example. Just look where you are, go left, go right, go there. Once you're there, now explore again. And, if you think about this, it's pretty interesting, because what if there's a construction side? Now, if you have an explicit, let's say, minimize this, minimize that, and the agent gets confused, well, there's, in order for me to minimize, I have to go straight, but I can't go straight, I'm stuck. Well, if you have this segmentation, now it can be a creative again until it gets to the next landmark. So that's the idea. I think what this paper is trying to do is increase creativity. You see, the fundamental problem with reinforcement learning is always exploitation versus exploration, right? And this is an attempt to solve that problem. So to summarize, 4 papers, Neurips, part 8, that I discuss here. First paper is DiffuseBot, so using physics-based models to augment geometric, such as diffusion, to solve a problem. And the question here is, of course, do we even need physics? Should we do one-to-one or one-on-one, end-to-end, or just, should we use this off-policy, teacher-forced method like physics or not? Second, multi-thread, multimodal tools, multimodal tools, augmented reasoning, acting traces for embodied agent planning. What this means is we have text caption that helps support video and helps learning. Third, PromptBook is a sort of task-specific guideline of how to use prompts to help a robot execute tasks. And exploitation-guided exploration is segmenting exploitation and exploration and finding more creative ways in an end-to-end learning context to execute the task. Thank you.